Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit Podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling. So this week on the podcast, we are joined by Chris Sylvester. Chris, you're from an organisation called Getting Clean. And when I first was made aware of you was at a conference a few months ago that Recovery Connections had put on. And after hearing you speak, I just thought, you know what it is, I love what he's doing. He's got a bit about him, a bit of crack, a bit of banter. And I just thought I'd love to get you on the podcast for a few reasons. I think it's inspirational what you've managed to achieve. And secondly, this podcast is all about hope, opportunity, inspiration. And I think you've given hope and opportunity to so many people through the work that you're doing that I just thought everybody needs to hear about it. And I see everybody that listens to my podcast at least anyway. So here you are, mate. Tell us a little bit about why you're on the podcast and what you're all about.
So I'm Chris Sylvester. I'm the founder of Getting Clean community interest company, and we are a LERO, a lived experience recovery organisation based in Leeds, and we help people overcome addiction by tackling environmental issues in our communities. So right back to the beginning, I started using heroin as a 12-year-old, first introduced in the high school toilets. I had real difficulties learning in a conventional setting, in a classroom. I just really struggled with my attention, and as a result, my behaviour. You know, I found it really difficult to learn in that setting. So I used to knock off class a lot, and I'd either go out of school, or if there were just one class that I were trying to swerve that I didn't like, I'd just kick around in toilets or go mooching about. And this first time that I were introduced to heroin, you know, I were in school toilets, avoiding going to a mathematics class because I struggled and I didn't like teacher. I always was made to feel like I was stupid because I didn't know things that I assumed everybody else did. I always compared myself to people. And I always remember being in this cubicle and just hearing the rustle of tinfoil and lighters flickering and hushed voices, you know, and people trying to keep, and these strange smells as well. I could smell it. I knew there was something going on. And me being me, very inquisitive by nature, peered over the top of this cubicle and found myself in this cubicle moments later with these two lads that I sort of saw as being icons. Mm-hmm. They were older than me. They were in trouble. They were bad lads. They had this reputation for being hard, and, you know, that's everything that I aspired to be at that point in my life. You know, so moments later, I'm inhaling heroin through a rolled up tutor, some tinfoil. And from that moment on, pretty much opened the doors to 26 years of active addiction. You know, I was registered at Leeds Addiction Unit at age of 13, 14. Excluded from school not long after that. And straight away involved in criminality. You know, grafting to earn money for drugs. So that initially started in school, going in and nicking teachers' handbags or taking people's dinner money off them or stealing video equipment or whatever we could do to get money, we'd do. But ultimately, I was excluded not long after that introduction. Yeah.
And then as you get in adulthood, that's just continuing snowballing?
Yeah, so throughout my life, from being that child first introduced to heroin, you know, a period that I recall where I wasn't under the influence of something that was mind or mood altering. Yeah. You know, I couldn't deal with reality. I never had a relationship with myself. I just didn't know where I fit into the world. Found it really confusing. And initially it were all a lot of fun. It were really exciting. It were thrilling. It were like I were a hunter, you know, going out and acquiring these substances through criminal activities that were exciting as well. But as I got older, it really had an impact on my mental and physical health, you know, and everything around me, my standing in society, the relationships I had were massively impacted, you know. And now I understand and I identify as an addict that's in long-term recovery. But before I found recovery, I always assumed that the problem were the drugs.
They were just the solution.
Part
of it.
Yeah, well, that's just how I dealt. There were symptoms. That's how I like to look at it. It's how it manifested itself, you know. And it's very telling because the primary drugs that I'm always attracted to and always end up on are heroin and cocaine, and they're both painkillers.
Yeah.
You know, one's an anaesthetic, a local anaesthetic. One's for general pain relief. So ultimately, that tells me that I'm in pain.
Yeah.
If I'm drawn to these substances. But I just never had a way of articulating or understanding what were going on for me. And I never had the confidence or the ability to communicate honestly about how I felt, about what were going on for me, because I were always consumed by fear.
Yeah. And when did that change for you then? So obviously 26 years active addiction. I imagine there's been all kinds gone on, chaos after chaos after chaos through that time. What was the point where you went, this is it, I need to do something different, or I need to get in recovery?
So I didn't intend on getting clean.
Right.
That wasn't in the plan. That wasn't on the agenda. Because I was powerless to addiction.
Yeah.
And I always had been. And while ever I use substances, I always will be, you know. So the scenario is I've been released from prison as a PPO, that's a priority prolific offender. And I had to provide urine samples for my probation officer. These had to be clean, yeah, as part of my licence conditions. Now, there were no way that this could possibly happen because I'm an addict.
Yeah.
And I can convince everybody around me and myself that I'm not going to use it, that things are going to be different. But as soon as I'm left to my own devices, as soon as I'm by myself, this voice of addiction that speaks in my voice, talks to me in my tones, you know, it tells me that it'll be all right. I'll do it just once. You'll be okay. We'll just do it once, that's it. But I know there's no such thing now as just once. So the scenario is I've just been discharged from hospital, not long after being released from prison. That last sentence that I did were horrendous, absolutely. The worst experience that I'd ever had in custody. And one that broke me. It chipped away at me and it broke me. And I'd sworn that when I got out, things were going to be different, and I'd tried my hardest to ensure that there would be, you know. But ultimately, I relapsed. And I went straight back to mainlining in my groin in no time, you know. And I had to attend a probation appointment, and my mum was devastated, and she was like desperate for me. She was convinced I was going to lose my leg because I'd been hospitalised and I had this infection, so my leg had swelled up like an elephant. It was red raw, I couldn't bear weight on it. And she was just desperate for me to access some kind of support and help. And she was pleading because I'd been actually booted out of hospital for using. But she was desperate because she believed that I was going to die or lose my leg. And my probation officer at that time were really good. They called her Donna. You know, I owe her so much. Because she'd been visiting me in and out of prison, and she developed this relationship with me, and she saw something in me that I didn't see myself. And there were a volunteer, and this volunteer that were helping facilitate these urine tests and sort of being of service at probation, mentioned 12-step recovery. You know, he said, "Have you tried Narcotics Anonymous?" Yeah. So I didn't finish school, but I knew what anonymous meant.
Yeah.
I'm not stupid. So my probation worker, she's all over this. I couldn't believe it, because she should have been recalling me back to prison for a fixed term, which were like 2 years, because I breached my licence conditions. So when she says, why don't you go to this meeting that's anonymous, and I won't recall you to prison, I thought she'd gone mad. Honestly.
She might have, did she?
I was rubbing my hands together because I didn't see, my addiction had already convinced me that this wasn't going to work, because who goes to meetings and talks about the feelings, and I'd had it explained to me what this was, and I'd come to the conclusion straight away my addiction had answered this ain't for you, this ain't going to work, but there's an opportunity here. You can carry on doing what you're doing now and you'll be supported. Your mum's going to move you back in because she's desperate, so you can manipulate her, you can get cash out of her. Your probation officer's not going to recall you back to prison, so we can carry on using, we can carry on scheming, and my addiction was rubbing its hands together. But something miraculous happened. I attended that first meeting and I was absolutely blown away, because somebody really credible from my past opened door. Now, I'd automatically assumed that nobody was going to attend these meetings that had lived like me and come from background that I had, that had been in and out of prison, that had used substances like I had, that had been on this journey. I didn't believe there were going to be anybody like me here. But then, when I'm faced with somebody, open door, somebody that used to sell weights of crack to me. So this guy, I didn't even know that he smoked. I didn't know. I knew that he sold crack, but I didn't know that he smoked it. So, when he opened door to me and he said, Chris, come in, sit down. He said, there's 3 things that's waiting for you. That's jails, institutions, and death. If you carry on, that's what's waiting for you. Yeah? And I knew what he was saying was right, because I'd experienced all of that. From being a child, I'd been in and out of institutions, I'd been in and out of prisons, and the amount of times that I've been resuscitated and brought back to life, having people trying to end my life, being stabbed, being involved in criminality, being involved in situations that very nearly cost me my life, associated to addiction and criminality. I knew what he was saying were right. But more than that, when I sat down with these people in this environment, they had the confidence and the courage to be honest and to talk about what were going on for them, their feelings, their fears, all this stuff that I felt and I related to these people so much. I identified with them, but I never had the ability to be honest through fear. Of what were going on for me, and that was from being a kid, from being a very small kid. I didn't have a way.
And that, to me, Chris, it's kind of, I always talk about finding your tribe, finding the people around you, who you can aspire to be like, who are a little bit further ahead in the journey, but actually get you. There's no judgment, people are empathetic and people understand. And once you find them things, it's quite a powerful thing, isn't it?
Oh, do you know something? For years, I'd had people trying to help me. Like I started going to prison when I was 15. Leading up to that, there were lots of sort of youth justice workers, lots of people from a criminal justice background, lots of support workers, lots of professionals, trying to help me. And then throughout my addiction, like people from a healthcare background, support workers, probation officers, psychologists, healthcare professionals, people that were well-intentioned, that wanted the best for me, and had always tried advising me and giving me these solutions. But like I said, my addiction always spoke louder than all these people. And my addiction always said, they don't know what it's like. They don't know you, Chris. They don't know what it's like to wake up with that shame and guilt for what you've had to do, get drugs.
Yeah.
They don't know what it's like to wake up with that obsession to use drugs, that compulsion that comes with it. So for them to say that this is possible, they don't know you. But then when I'm sort of around people with lived experience, that have a program, that are solution focused, that I identify with, it's tangible, it's real. So finding my tribe, it were a solution, and it allowed me to embrace recovery, with both hands.
Yeah. What were them early days like? First 6-12 months in recovery?
So my journey through recovery, I've experienced relapse, so initially I got 30 days and I was living in like a therapeutic community, a residential sort of daycare setting where I'm from in Leeds. And my idea of celebrating this 30-day keyring that I've collected is to go out to a nightclub and celebrate and convince everybody around me, oh, no, it's all right. Alcohol's never been my problem. Yeah. I'll be okay. Needless to say, I relapsed, and drank myself stupid. Then I sort of came back. And there were a couple of times where I'd got to 60 days, 90 days, and then I'd relapsed, I'd smoke bud or I'd just fall off. And then I managed to get myself to a point where I was, I'd say, around about 13 months of abstinence, sort of engaging in 12-step recovery, but not surrendered. Mm-hmm. Not surrendered to the fact, that I needed to embrace the 4 suggested things in recovery, and for me, when people spoke about surrender, I just couldn't get my head around it because I'd always tried to control everything in my life. Yeah. So I wasn't able to fully surrender. I could do service as suggested. I could do step work as suggested. I could attend meetings as suggested. And I could engage with my sponsor and start working through this program. But I'd never, ever fully embraced humility and surrendered. So needless to say, I became obsessed with boxing, going to the gym, fixing this external image of myself. I got well carried away with that, to a point where I was listening to people in the gym telling me that, I was recovered, I didn't need to go to meetings anymore. And then obviously I'm obsessed with chasing women. Next thing, my addiction's manifested itself in this because it makes me feel good, it makes me feel attractive, it makes me feel wanted, all this stuff. And needless to say, after 13 months, I relapsed and I were out at door for 11 and a half, 12 months. And that were an absolute nightmare, And I came back completely humble, needless to say, after experiencing recovery and what it had to offer, and then the nightmare of active addiction and everything that went with it. I found myself at a point in my life where I needed to make a decision, and I knew what that decision was.
I think there's a point there, isn't there, that a lot of people who I know who are still in active addiction will go, but if I give it up, I've got nothing to live for. And I think once you've been in recovery and you've experienced what there is to live for and how different that can be, and then lapse potentially and go back out a bit, you want to be back in recovery. At some point when you surrender, you want to get back to that life, don't you? Because you realise that there's so much more opportunity, potential, hope, inspiration waiting for you if you can get there.
This is it, and they say, don't they, that the only thing you have to change is everything. Yeah, and I get that completely now, because there were aspects of my personality that I wasn't willing to let go, character defects, this I don't know, this preconceived idea that I always knew best, when it were regarding me, and I found it difficult to take on suggestions. So when people spoke to me about abstinence, I could never have seen myself without having something. Yeah. I needed something, to change how I felt. And then coming into recovery and putting substances down, my addiction manifested itself in different areas that sort of helped me fill this void that I had, this spiritual void, which I learnt about,
I think that's still fear-driven, Chris? Was that still fear-driven for you or not?
I think so. I think fear is such an all-encompassing thing. It's like initially when I spoke about fear, it would have been a threat, an initial threat, and that's how I assumed fear to be. But when I got in recovery and started to learn about myself, I realised that addiction is a fear-based illness. you know, and for years I've been in fear of not feeling like I was good enough and trying to portray that I was and trying to prove to everybody with this massive ego that I was somebody and that I did have that, like that humility again, you know, that I knew all answers. I could finish his sentence. I knew everything. I don't need to worry about, oh, I've got it going on because I'm in control. But surrendering for me now means the humility of being able to accept help, take on suggestions, and know, you know, that I don't know best all the time, and that's fine. That's good. You know, like a wise man, you know, he's willing to work with people. A wise man knows nothing. Yeah, that's what they say, apparently.
It's learning, isn't it? That's the whole, what I'm hearing there is when you're actually let go of that need to control, you then open your eyes to opportunity and potential and learning. And that's massive for people in recovery, I think, is that they have the humility to go, I'm okay now, as in like I'm coping, but actually how do I become a little bit better?
Yeah.
The version of me, how does it become a little bit better? And I think that's for me what recovery is about that journey of discovering who am I and how can I be a little bit better.
Most definitely. And like for me, when we talk about recovery, I've always had a moral compass. You know, I was taught wrong from right growing up, you know. But as soon as I started taking substances, I became further and further detached from this moral compass. And I can do the most heinous acts to get drugs. You know, I can commit crimes and I can do things which, you know, cause me a lot of shame and guilt now.
Yeah.
You know, I've lived in my life historically. But, you know, like, for me, recovery really has been discovery because I started taking drugs as a child. Now, I knew right from wrong, but I never had a relationship with myself, like I was saying. I didn't know, you know, who I was. I believed that who I was supposed to be, and that were all sort of guided and influenced by people around me that were always negative. You know, all these negative influences that I had. I didn't understand respect. I believed that to be respected, that meant you were feared. You know, so I never really got a grasp on what true respect was. And then coming into recovery and accepting, you know, living by spiritual principles, open-mindedness, willingness, honesty, humility, all these things, you know, allowed me to develop this relationship with myself and to know what I like and to know who I am and to see the value of what I have to offer, you know. And like they say in the meetings that I attend and in literature, more will be revealed, you know, and I truly believe that because I'm in this journey now, I'm evolving, yeah.
Through that process, Chris, what did you learn about yourself? What did you learn that you liked, that you didn't know?
What did I know? Ask me that again.
What did you learn through this recovery journey about yourself that you now know that you like? So, like, what's the things that have come up that you've gone, oh, God, that's who I am. That's what I enjoy. They're the things that have come by being on this journey of discovery.
Yeah, I think the number one thing there is connection, you know, and having relationships with people, you know, heartfelt relationships, you know, having confidence to be able to communicate and talk about what's going on for me, being able to cry with people, being able to laugh with people.
It's all the emotions, isn't it?
Yeah, being able to embrace that.
I think a lot of people talk about like emotions. Oh, I've got my emotions back. You know, I experience sadness. I can cry now. All that sort of stuff. But I didn't even know how to be happy. You know, and in active addiction, being happy was what I thought was, you know, using or gambling or taking coke or whatever. But actually, just being able to connect and go, that's what happiness is. That's true happiness. You know, that's true joy. I've got these feelings. It's not always just the bad ones that we feel. It's the really good ones that we start feeling as well, isn't it?
So I often chase serenity. It's hard to come by, but feeling at ease in myself and at peace. Content, and having that, you know, I'm a very active man, very active mind, you know, constantly on go. And before, I always had to be doing something. Whereas now, when I have the opportunity to sit down, relax, and embrace, what's going on for me, being in the moment. It's magical. When I sit back and I can take pride in my achievements and what I've done, and everything that's gone on in my recovery, my relationships, the love that I have in my life. I've got a lot of love, you know what I'm saying? A lot of love. And I'm eternally grateful for that.
Yeah. And how far are you in your recovery now, Chris?
So,
where do you sit now?
I just turned my phone off because it were annoying me, but I've got a clean time countdown, but it's around about 7 years, 3 months.
Right. Brilliant.
Yeah. So a decent chunk.
Yeah, definitely.
A decent chunk, but we only have one day at a time.
100%.
Yeah. So one day at a time,
So through them 7 years, Chris, you've been on a journey to that point. Looked after yourself, started learning about yourself, discovering who you were. What was that like to do?
You know something? Like I say, we're always consumed with fear, and I always believed I had to portray this image of who I perceived I was supposed to be. Whereas now, I'm happy being me, just being Chris, yeah. Warts and all, with my defects of character, but also with my assets, but being confident in recovery, in embracing all these feelings and this development, because I've achieved great things. I have, undoubtedly, and I say that with greatest humility. There's been lots to sort of recognise, that recognition, that growth, that change. But it's been difficult at times, and I've made things difficult for myself. I really have caused myself a lot of pain through my recovery. But I think potentially that's where a lot of growth has come.
Definitely, isn't it? It's how we look at it now, isn't it? And if we're looking at it as opportunities to learn, which is what I like to call them, then we can take something away from it. Pain's inevitable in life, though, isn't it? We can't go through life without it.
No, I think that, like you say, it's inevitable. At some point in your life, you're going to have to deal with emotions.
Yeah.
And initially, when I came into recovery, I found it hard to look at my past and what I'd done and harms that I'd caused. And that's why I was so motivated to say, do you know something? That's not who I am. I'm responsible for them actions. Yeah. It was me that did that, but I'm not responsible for my addiction. I'm responsible for my recovery and who I am today and how I live today and what I choose to do for myself and for my community. So that's been a massive driver in my life to say, look,
purpose, isn't it? You feel that you've got purpose now.
100%. I know what my purpose is, and my purpose is to provide opportunities for people, and for people to access sustainable recovery and find a new way to live, and for me to utilise all my experiences that past as a way of adding value to people's recovery, and sharing that journey. Because no time's wasted. Yeah. I believe I wasted time for a long time. All the times I'd sat in prison cells, comparing myself against other people in my life that had gone on, I'm from Armley, ironically. That's the local Nick in Leeds, the local jail's at Armley. And I were always drawn to this big castle on the hill, the big house. I were always drawn to it, and I'd always walk around and I'd shout over the wall to prisoners, have conversations with them. I was just obsessed with the building, do you know what I mean? Before I ended up starting going there, so it was like inevitable that I was going to end up there, and I just think how bizarre and strange, I'd want to go have conversations with inmates and shout, what are you having for your tea? And, what have you been up to today? All madness. You know what I'm saying?
Something you said there, Chris, was like, now your purpose is to provide opportunity to other people.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us how you're now helping and providing opportunity to other people.
So, coming into recovery, I didn't know what I was going to do. I embraced recovery and I loved it. But historically, when I look at my past, all I'd ever done was commit crime. being involved in selling drugs, various sort of, bit of a career criminal. I didn't have any education. I didn't have any legitimate work experience. So I gravitated towards support work because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I didn't believe in myself. I had a really low self-esteem. On the face of it, I could come across very confident, but like in lots of areas, I'm not that strong. I'm not that competent. I'm not that qualified. I'm not that good. And I always used to focus on that. Yeah. So gravitating towards support work, I started working in services in Leeds, homeless provisions, for third sector organisations. And I'd see all these people that I identified with, that I'd shared experience with, coming back in and out of services, in and out of criminal justice, massive machine prisons, in and out, coming out homeless. And I think, something, there's got to be more that I can do here. Ultimately, my capacity was limited as a support worker.
Yeah.
And I realised the value of my lived experience had so much more to offer. And like we speak about purpose, I realised everybody needed a purpose. Mm-hmm. But more than that, everyone's got skills. Everyone has strengths, And instead of focusing on what I can't do, I decided, I'm going to focus on what I can do. I'm going to utilise all the skills that I'd acquired throughout my criminality, and I'm going to transfer them into a positive way. I'm going to help people. I'm going to create networks of support. I'm going to come up with a concept which means we can tackle environmental issues because we're products of this environment, mm-hmm. And we can give back. We can challenge stigma and change the perception of addiction. We can reduce reoffending and offending in community and create pathways to employment. So I'm sat at my desk constantly lots of tiresome, burdensome, safeguarding, risk assessments, like
all them beautiful words that I love.
Support plans, this and that. And I was supposed to be a support worker, but ultimately I'd be lucky if I spent a couple of hours a day speaking to anybody. People. And then it got to a point where I'd be asked to do a support plan, and I can't get the geezer to sit down because he's off the score. He's not wanting to sit down with me and go through all his questions. He's got bigger fish to fry. You know what I'm saying? He's got to get out there and he's got to earn his dough so he can get his bag of spice or his one of each. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So when my team leader says, "Oh, we'll just do it without him," I think, I need to get out of this job because how I can do a support plan for somebody that's not even present is beyond me, because that's not honest. That's what I think somebody needs. Now, if support's going to work, it has to be a two-way thing.
Yeah, totally.
So I came up with the idea of forming Getting Clean. Yeah? So that's a group of people in recovery carrying a message of hope, giving back, challenging stigma, changing the perception of addiction within society, whilst tackling environmental issues. So initially I'd be working a 50-hour week in this homeless shelter, and that'd be Monday to Thursday, 12-hour shifts. And then, Friday would come and I'd plan and coordinate activities, and then Saturday we'd go out and we'd do these activities. So they'd start with like litter picking, mm-hmm. And we'd get all these bags picked, these purple bags, and it were really well attended. I'd speak to my people, my network, and say, look, get involved. Let's help get people into recovery. Let's carry a message of hope, yeah? Let's show people that change is possible, and let's look after our community. Let's tidy up. Let's get clean, you know what I'm saying?
Love it.
Let's get clean. So we're picking this litter and all these bags are mounting up and this group is growing, and I'm thinking, for one, the skills available in this group now, there's loads. There's loads of people with past experiences that can do so much. We've sort of mobilised a little army here, do you know what I mean? People in recovery coming together, supporting each other and supporting community. And then the other thing I'm looking at is all these bags, these purple bags, I'm thinking, what's happening with these bags? I'm a bit of a deep thinker. So, you know, it's amazing that we're picking this litter, but what's happening? Where's it going? So we coordinated an educational excursion, yeah? Got a minibus full of people and we went to the plant, the Viola plant in Leeds, to see what was going on with all this rubbish, yeah? And lo and behold, we found out it's been incinerated. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's been burned, and we're told it's burnt at an higher temperature, so it's better for ozone. But ultimately, it don't take a rocket scientist to work out that burning things is bad for ozone. So I'm like, look, what can we do better as a group to look after our environment and our planet? What can we do better? So I started to network a little bit, and I found out that there were a recycling plant. So we went at another little trip there, and we learned how to recycle and what we could recycle. And from that point, moving forward, we decided and we made a pledge that when we pick litter, we were going to process as we were picking, and we were going to recycle what we could, because it's better for the planet, yeah? And then, you know, we'd pick other purple bags of stuff that we couldn't recycle. We started doing that. Then we started looking at this group and all members, and we realised people are coming from different backgrounds, building, maintenance work, lots of different things. I'm no good at fixing fences, but I know people that are.
Yeah.
And more than that, I know that there's people in my community that can't fix their own fences. Elderly people, disabled people, vulnerable citizens that ain't got the means or the ability, you know, to fix the fence or to do some decorating jobs or to do some DIY. So we decided as a group that we were going to give back and that we were going to support the most vulnerable in our communities, working with councillors in their wards. So setting up like a referral route for jobs to come through. So then we could approach businesses to say, look, support us in our work, help us pay for materials, and we'll start doing these jobs. So the jobs we were doing were amazing because it meant that we were bringing people together. And just like in recovery, we were learning from each other.
Yeah.
You know, so this restorative work is taking place between people that are sort of described as being broken, but they're rebuilding themselves, helping rebuild each other, and then they're rebuilding a fence and they're teaching people how to do it. So it's all skills and strengths. It's all about empowerment, yeah? So these people then said, we're going to do more. And I'm like, it's brilliant. If we're going to do all these jobs, we need to start looking for an income stream now, yeah? So what we need is a product. Now, I know about products from my background.
Yeah.
I know how important it is to have a product, and especially a product that you believe in. So this product that we come up with, Getting Clean soap, yeah? Soap with hope, made in therapeutic workshops from people, you know, overcoming addiction, finding a new way to live, from natural ingredients, you know, so like we learn how to make soap together, and then it'd go on a shelf for a month after it's cut to mature. When it's matured, it'll come back to another session, and it'll be wrapped in recycled papers and tape, yeah? So it's better for the planet. Everything we're doing is ethical. And then we take it to market, yeah? And that allows us to engage with members of the public. We can share our journeys. And it's not all about talking about trauma and everything that's gone on. We don't do that. You know, I've seen that done time and time again. Sort of trauma porn, they call it. You know, like, you know, heartstrings. It's nonsense. What we do is we talk about recovery, what we're doing, the positive aspects of what we're doing. You know, we're making amends directly and indirectly by work that we're doing. And the soap, it sells itself. It's a good product. It's a strong product. It says hope in the side, soap with hope, yeah? It's a bar of soap that reduces crime and grime at the same time. You don't come across many bars like that, pal. You know what I'm saying? It's a proper product with social value off the scale, building blocks of lives and communities.
I love it. And that honestly, Chris, when I first heard about it, I just thought, genius. Like, honestly, it all just ties together, doesn't it? And actually, it's like this big one ecosystem, isn't it? Of just continuously, you know, getting clean, as in the person, but actually the environment, the community, giving back. It's got all them aspects that we talk about in 12-step fellowships and all that sort of stuff. It's got everything in there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, I imagine the people that are involved in working in it are just, it gives them that passion and purpose, doesn't it, of achieving something, but then giving back, and it's all tied together. Honestly, I think it's amazing, Chris, what you've achieved.
Well, the thing is, it allows people to become stakeholders, yeah? So we are an opportunity provider. We're not a service provider. We've formed strong partnerships with treatment providers and service providers in our area, Forward Leads. We collaborate with them. You know, we deliver workshops in their building once a week, and we help out where we can. But we don't aspire to be treatment providers. Yeah. We're opportunity providers. And when I work with people, it's very democratic. Yeah. I ask them what they think and what do they enjoy doing. And I say, let's turn this into a job. But not just a job, a career. Yeah. Because there's so much scope with this soap and other bits and bats that we're doing. You know, it means that people can take ownership. So we developed a tier system. Mm-hmm. So like when people are regularly attending, they can go through training, they can become competent, qualified, and able to help a newcomer that comes in learn a new aspect of one of the offerings within what we do. Yeah? And then backed by that, I formed a partnership with Professor David Best, looking at his recovery capital model. So this means that, you know, when I first met him, this David Best guy, top guy, when I met him, it were at an inclusive recovery city meeting, and he had these decks of cards, and I was looking at him, and I thought, let's have a look, see what this is. And he started explaining it to me, and straight away I identified it to be like a SWOT analysis in business. Yeah. But rather than looking for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, you know, we're looking at recovery capital, social, community and personal, unmet needs and barriers. Yeah. And that means that when we're working with people, we can identify where they're at. You know, when they first start working with us, we can look at their unmet needs, the barriers, all this stuff, and we can link in with our partners and other service providers to ensure that momentum is kept and that these barriers and unmet needs are met and overcome, to ensure that goals can be achieved and recovery can be sustainable. And they're part of it. Like I say, the stakeholders. You know, it's not like I'm sitting there like I would have been as a support worker with this tiresome work or tick boxes and all that. It's not. We sat with a deck of cards, we're having a laugh. You know, it's
real, isn't it? It's real life, and it's the real people. And the thing I enjoy most about this, Chris, is they have autonomy, don't they? They have autonomy and see it in what their recovery looks like and how they move forward. And for me, that has to be the most, you know, inspiring part of this, is that you're giving other people who thought that they probably would never have dreamt of being in these positions opportunity. Yeah. Opportunity, go and do better.
Well, this is the thing. And we've created opportunities now. 4 employees in 18 months. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is massive.
And like we just keep winning awards. I won a gold owl. Now Leeds, the City Arms, it's got 2 owls on it. Right. Yeah, we're known as the Owls. Yeah. Now I'm passionate about Leeds, not just the football club, but the city. My son is named Leodis, which is the Celtic name for Leeds. I care about it. So to win an award, we didn't put ourselves forward for it, but to win this gold owl, such an achievement. Yeah. You know, I'm so proud of each and every member, because it's not me that's won it, it's us that's won it. And like I say, we're like this little army, and we're taking the fight to addiction.
Yeah. And I love it. I think there's so many positive messages there, Chris, and one-liners, which I love as well. Yeah, so don't stop them. But Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I think for me, what I've sat and witnessed is just a guy who is super passionate about making a difference and giving back. And through that, you know, the amount of people you're going to inspire to go and do the same is endless, you know. So well done on your awards, but more importantly, well done on just being an incredible human being.
Thank you, man.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit Podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.